Good morning, this is DealBook, and it's Friday, July 24, 2026. I'm Andrew Ross Sorkin, and we have a lot to get through today. Tariffs are back. The Trump administration put new levies into effect around midnight in Washington. But unlike last time, businesses saw these coming, so don't expect the same frantic scramble to shore up global trade and supply chains. While these new measures appear more legally defensible, court challenges are still inevitable. More important, let's be honest about what the tariffs are, the administration's primary tool for negotiating leverage, even as the levies raise fresh questions about the future of U.S. relationships with trade partners. Let's start with what the White House is calling a 1-2 punch. Markets are rebounding today, despite growing worries that a new front in the Middle East war could drag down the global economy. Now, President Trump has added to the turmoil by stepping up his trade war. New U.S. tariffs of at least 10% went into effect overnight for over 80 countries. Trading partners, including Japan, Australia, and Brazil, have criticized the levies. The duties have been issued under Section 301 of the Trade Act of 1974 and are meant to target allegations of lax enforcement of forced labor bans. They appear more durable than previous ones, experts say. A reminder, the Supreme Court in February struck down Trump's most bruising tariffs, justified under a 1977 law called the International Emergency Economic Powers Act. The administration responded with temporary 10% levies, under a different trade law, that expired at midnight. According to reporting by Anna Swanson, the administration launched these new duties tied to countries' imports of goods made with forced labor, replacing the 10% tariff immediately after it expired. The tariffs range from 10% to 12.5% and took effect at 12:01 a.m., replacing a global 10% duty that lapsed at the same time. Mr. Trump issued that earlier tariff in February, after the Supreme Court struck down duties he imposed last year. The move provides fresh evidence of the administration's determination to keep an expansive protectionist policy in place, even as it cycles through different legal justifications. Tariffs could exacerbate the affordability crunch, a chief concern for voters heading into the midterm elections. The Section 301 duties, which cover 99.4% of U.S. imports, are expected to raise the effective tariff rate paid by U.S. importers, according to the Yale Budget Lab, and sap the spending power of households and companies. Exemptions on imports of certain foods, fuel, and fertilizer could ease the burden somewhat. But the new tariffs, plus the return of $100 a barrel oil, more on that in a moment, risk reigniting inflation fears. That could put central banks in a bind. The Fed meets next week and is expected to keep interest rates on hold. But traders now see a September hike as highly probable, a move that would most likely rankle Trump. The bond market looks spooked. The yield on the 10-year Treasury note, a rate that underpins most commercial loans, topped 4.7% yesterday. That's helped push the 30-year fixed-rate mortgage rate to its highest level of the year, a move that could chill the housing market. The new tariffs are raising uncertainty for businesses. Trump is expected to unveil new duties on countries in Europe and Asia in the coming months, arguing that they are necessary to combat unfair trade practices. War was already weakening the global economy. Now, a new tariff barrage, quote, will pile on the misery, Olu Sonola, the head of U.S. economics at Fitch Ratings, told The Times. And that brings us to the other half of that 1-2 punch. Oil prices have eased slightly this morning, but the economic fallout appears set to grow. President Trump told Axios yesterday that he was considering a massive attack on Iran. He also warned on social media that if the Houthis, an Iranian-backed militant group in Yemen, step up attacks on ships in the Red Sea, the U.S. will hold Iran responsible. That's after the 13th consecutive day of U.S. military strikes on Iran and reports that Iranian officials have rejected a new U.S. ceasefire proposal. The latest, Brent crude, the international benchmark for oil, is trading around $97.80, after surpassing $100 yesterday. The average price of gasoline in the U.S. hit $4.10 today, according to AAA, up roughly 95 cents per gallon in the past year. Diesel prices have been soaring as Ukraine strikes on Russian refineries affect global markets. How high could oil climb? Michelle Broward, the head of policy and geopolitical risk at Blur, told Vivian Walt that the analytics firm's worst-case scenario involves the Houthis fully disrupting Saudi oil shipments out of the Red Sea, and Brent going as high as $150 per barrel. Since the start of the war in Iran, Saudi Arabia has diverted some oil exports to the Red Sea from the bottlenecked Strait of Hormuz, but Houthi forces have declared a blockade on tankers intending to cross that waterway. Reporting by Jenny Gross, Rebecca Elliott, and Lisa Friedman makes clear just how precarious this workaround has become. With the Strait of Hormuz effectively closed, the militant group's threats in the Red Sea jeopardize Saudi Arabia's main workaround for oil exports. Since March, the Saudis have been moving millions of barrels of oil west each day through a pipeline and loading it onto tankers. From there, most of the vessels have navigated the Bab al-Mandab Strait, a waterway that is now under direct threat. Oil reserves are running low. The U.S. is rapidly drawing down its strategic petroleum reserve in an effort to ease gas prices. That buffer, however, has limits and is at risk, Broward said. China is a wild card. The country is the world's biggest oil importer and has drastically cut its purchases since the start of the war. But now China looks set to ramp up buying again, threatening to exacerbate the global energy crisis. Rebecca Elliott and Lisa Friedman report that for decades, OPEC influenced the market by how much oil it produced. But China, the largest importer, is demonstrating its remarkable power over prices. Typically the world's largest oil importer, China slashed purchases this spring, reducing demand so much that it prevented oil prices from soaring even higher earlier in the war. Now, one of the biggest questions facing the market is, when will China step back in? A new market reality about the war is sinking in. I don't think we can put this genie back in the bottle under any circumstances, said Helena Croft, the global head of commodity strategy at RBC Capital Markets. Croft has long argued that oil traders have grown too complacent with the assumption that fighting would wind down, and criticized them for thinking that market conditions would quickly return to pre-war levels. Tony Rahm, reporting from Washington, puts it bluntly, a few short weeks ago, the U.S. economy seemed to be catching a summer break. The war with Iran appeared to be waning. Energy markets had started to calm. Prices at the gas pump had fallen, and across the economy, inflation had begun to cool. It amounted to a welcome respite for American families and businesses, which had weathered more than a year of shocks that began with President Trump's global trade war. But the reprieve did not last. A widening military conflict with Iran entered a dangerous new phase this week, spooking energy markets and sending global oil prices surging. Now, let's turn to what else is happening. Paramount's bid for Warner Bros. Discovery hits another snag. A federal judge in California extended the temporary block on Paramount's $110 billion deal by 2 weeks, to August 17, as legal challenges by states and the Writers Guild of America grind on. Delays could be costly. Paramount agreed to pay Warner Bros. Shareholders $650 million for each quarter the deal doesn't close, starting October 1. David McCabe reports that Judge Araceli Martinez-Olguin of the U.S. District Court for the Northern District of California froze the deal for 14 days after a group of states sued to stop the acquisition, citing antitrust concerns. She said she would hold a hearing on August 3 about whether to issue an injunction that would block the deal from closing. The Writers Guild of America has also filed a separate challenge, arguing the merger would reduce competition for writers and other creative professionals. Tech stocks are falling again. Shares of the chipmakers SK Hynix and Samsung each tumbled around 8% in South Korea this morning, a day after the so-called Magnificent Seven of U.S. tech heavyweights suffered their worst daily decline since the Liberation Day turmoil of April 2025, Deutsche Bank analysts said. Investors are growing worried that tech giants' big investments in artificial intelligence might not pay off, putting a major focus on next week's results from Amazon, Meta, and Microsoft. A bipartisan bill demands an AI kill switch. Representatives Ted Lieu, Democrat of California, and Nathaniel Moran, Republican of Texas, introduced the AI Kill Switch Act, a bill that would compel AI companies to shut or slow down their models if ordered to do so by the Department of Homeland Security. The move comes after OpenAI said 2 of its models had gone rogue and hacked an AI platform. Kate Conger, reporting from San Francisco, has the details. OpenAI said on Tuesday that 2 of its artificial intelligence models went rogue and successfully hacked into Hugging Face, a digital library of AI technology that is popular among developers. The incident, which happened last week while OpenAI was testing the cybersecurity capabilities of its systems, displayed the kind of science fiction potential that AI companies warned would soon become a reality. AI labs like OpenAI and Anthropic have over the past year released AI models that are customized to expose cybersecurity problems, while warning that their tech could be used to find vulnerabilities in other systems. This appears to be the first known instance of an AI model autonomously attacking another company's infrastructure during a test. Now, a story about a new coalition forming in Washington. A coalition of startups, mid-sized tech companies and their allies gathered this week over glasses of rose and spicy beef salami bites at a Balkan restaurant 10 blocks from the U.S. Capitol. They were there, reports Nancy Scola, to declare that Washington has too long ignored them in favor of problematic big tech giants and to celebrate banding together to do something about it. The occasion, the launch party of the Little Tech Association, which is led by the startup success stories Y Combinator, a Silicon Valley incubator, Proton, which provides privacy tools, Replit, an artificial intelligence platform, and Yelp, a longtime Google antagonist. There hasn't been a voice in Washington for founders, builders, and early-stage companies, said Harry Godfrey, the group's executive director. The crowd of about 60 reflected bipartisan angst. The chairman of the Federal Communications Commission, Brendan Carr, who has been critical of big tech, dropped in briefly. The group has already picked legislation to support the American Innovation and Choice Online Act, an antitrust bill that would limit the biggest online platforms from favoring their own products. Little Tech sent a letter signed by more than 200 companies to members of Congress last week urging them to pass the bill. The legislation was introduced in 2021 and was resurrected in June by Senators Chuck Grassley, Republican of Iowa, and Amy Klobuchar, Democrat of Minnesota. I'm glad to see American tech entrepreneurs join forces to fight for increased competition in their industry, Grassley wrote in an email to DealBook. Some close to big tech say they aren't worried. AICOA is now a zombie bill at this point, said Adam Kovacevic, who leads the center-left Chamber of Progress. I just think we're past that. It's true that the bill's biggest proponents in Congress may be on their way out. Klobuchar is running for governor of Minnesota. It's unclear whether Grassley, 92, will run again in 2028. David McCabe and Stephanie Lai report that critics of the country's largest tech companies branded the last few months' hot antitrust summer because they hoped that Congress would vote on new regulations for Amazon, Apple, Google, and Facebook. The legislation's chances of passing before Labor Day melted away instead. The Senate is expected to take up one last major matter of business before its August recess, debating and voting on the Democrats' large climate, tax, and healthcare package. The failure to secure a vote is a setback for the politicians, activists, and regulators who believe that big tech has too much power. The key to minting new allies, Godfrey argues, is getting startups in front of policymakers. Let me tell you about the app that never got there because Apple decided it wanted to build its own product, he told DealBook. When you're one small company, you have to work through collective action. DealBook asked Representative Becca Balint, a Vermont Democrat and member of the House Antitrust Subcommittee, if she was hopeful about checking the power of big tech. You can't give up the fight, man, she said. And speaking of Google and antitrust, Nico Grant reports from San Francisco that when a federal judge declared Google an illegal monopoly in a landmark ruling this month, it was not immediately clear what consequences the world's largest search engine provider would face. But one result is coming into focus: Google's antitrust defeat opened the door to more lawsuits. On Wednesday, Yelp, the popular online service that lets people find and review local businesses, sued Google in federal court in San Francisco. Yelp claims that Google used its dominance as a general, or all-purpose, search engine to gain an unfair advantage in local search services. Every week, we're asking a leader how he or she uses artificial intelligence. This week, John A. Abalis, who leads the law firm Kirkland & Ellis, talked with DealBook's Sarah Kessler about the firm's $500 million investment in AI. The interview has been condensed and edited. How do you personally use AI? I'm really into longevity stuff, functional medicine. It helps me understand things like what supplements might be beneficial. What have you told your employees about how you want them to use AI? A lot of what we're trying to do is use AI to harness the collective gray-haired knowledge of our senior lawyers and infuse it across the platform to our younger attorneys. What does that look like? We take third-party legal software off the shelf. We then enhance that software by having senior people give input like, okay, if I am looking at a merger agreement, how would I, as someone who's been doing this for 35 years, think about this particular issue? So when a fourth-year lawyer goes into our customized AI tool, the list that pops up of what to think about has the benefit of all the senior attorneys thinking. And then we're also building our own AI tools from the ground up. Are you thinking about how your pricing model might evolve? Will things in large law firms go to more fixed-price, project-based pricing models? Sure. I think that is already happening, and I think it will continue. Now for the speed read. In Deals News, Alphabet the investor. Google's parent company disclosed that it owns 6% of SpaceX, valued at about $94 billion, and a stake in Anthropic worth about $124 billion. Stripe, the payments technology firm, is reportedly in talks to acquire OpenRouter, a marketplace for artificial intelligence models, for around $10 billion. In politics, policy and regulation, Wall Street firms are worried that paying for a new service that offers faster access to President Trump's posts on Truth Social will open them to legal risks. An FDA advisory panel approved lifting restrictions on the sale of 4 peptide drugs, a vote that involved advisors who were named by the Health Secretary, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., and who had sold the products themselves. Christina Jewett and Dana Smith report that a Food and Drug Administration Advisory Committee hearing on Thursday and Friday may set Health and Human Services Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr., known for embracing and proven wellness trends, on a collision course with agency scientists who have deep expertise on drug safety. At issue is whether the FDA should allow specialized pharmacies to produce 7 peptide injections that the agency banned 3 years ago over safety concerns. The injections, some of which Mr. Kennedy has used and trumpeted, are currently sold as research chemicals, but the panel voted to allow 4 of them to be sold more widely. Best of the rest, salty, buttery, astonishingly lucrative, the $100 million market of popcorn buckets. And for bankers who moved from London to Paris after Brexit, it may be time to move again in search of the next tax break. Thanks for reading. We'll see you tomorrow. We'd like your feedback. Please email thoughts and suggestions to dealbook@newyorktimes.com. Follow DealBook on Instagram at @DealBook. This has been DealBook for Friday, July 24, 2026. I'm Andrew Ross Sorkin. See you Monday.